welcome back. I want to bring you some breaking news regarding the situation in the United States, in the Minneapolis. You'll know if you've been watching the coverage over the last few days that there have been protests after the death of an unarmed black man in police custody on Monday. A police officer was filmed kneeling on the neck of George Floyd, 46 years old, despite him saying that he couldn't breathe, and then Mr. Floyd eventually died.
I'm heading back that way.
There have been 4 police officers that Mr. Floyd's family have demanded face murder charges. 4 police officers, they say, implicated in this death. We're hearing in the last few minutes that the Minnesota Public Safety Commissioner has said that the Minneapolis police, says a Minneapolis police officer has been taken into custody in regards to the death of Floyd, according to various media reports in the United States. So Mr. Floyd's family had previously wanted 4 police officers implicated in his death to face murder charges, but the latest we're hearing is that a police officer, we don't know who, has been taken into custody in relation to the death of George Floyd.
Vlad, stand by.
This was, the police said, a very different night of protest in Minneapolis. Burning buildings, looting and violence, an escalation as the anger and tension rises. Crowds protesting at a police station were driven back with tear gas. A man died after a shooting at a pawn shop. It is the video of the last moments of George Floyd's life. A police officer's knee on his neck that's driven the outrage. His family and the city's mayor calling for the officer to be charged with murder.
Why is the man killed George Floyd not?
These were some of the scenes.
If you had done it, or I had done it, we would be behind bars right now. And I cannot come up with a good answer to that question.
The protests have now spread. In Los Angeles, crowds blocked a freeway and clashed with police. The anger over the treatment of African-American men by police isn't new, but it is very raw right now. Fueled by things like this. A white man confronting black businessmen in the office gym.
What office? So we have an office here, and this guy came accusing us we can't be here. So,
what office are you in? Don't worry about that. We don't have to tell you.
The man's had his lease terminated. The actor John Boyega posted his frustrations.
A black man was just murdered in cold blood in the streets stateside again, while saying he can't breathe. That's a continuous cycle going on. Although I don't live in the States, but I'm black. That. So I'll say it again. You racist, white people.
That frustration is shared by America's politicians.
To watch Mr. Floyd be murdered in a video at a time when we're all so sad to begin with. It's always tragic. It has always been tragic. But there we saw on TV, being murdered on TV.
In Minneapolis, the community's feeling is clear. Donald Trump has said justice will be served, but it could take weeks for a prosecutor to decide on criminal charges. People here are impatient for answers.
Playing to a far more narrow audience than Joe Biden, to his anti-globalist loyalists. The fact he's pulling out of the WHO is no surprise. He is trying to appeal to those that like that agenda in 2016. The challenge for him is that 2020 could be decided by a far more diverse electorate. So he is taking a big risk with Minneapolis. But as we saw,
and lawyer Sholomos Shogbamilu and the Republican strategist Peter Lumage. A very warm welcome to both of you to the programme. And I suppose, Peter, we ought to start with you as a Republican strategist to try and walk us through a little bit about how we got here, because on the surface, these two were perfect for each other. It was a match made in heaven. The Trump presidency, you could argue, started through Twitter, but now they're at loggerheads. What's gone wrong?
Look, I think that Twitter actually fueled the debate between the platform and the president. What the president said is that when you had riots all night long, when you had the police department, which was attacked by these protesters, when you had the police department, one of the precincts had to abandon the headquarters because it was set on fire and there were threats that they would kill the police officers. When you had gunfire raging in various cities and 7 people were wounded, the president made it clear that, look, if need be, we have to send in the National Guard, the military. He was telling the governor that I'm willing to do anything and everything to assume control of the situation.
Can and still can't count on the economy. When they hear African American, the way that it sounds to them is different from how it sounds to me. See, we think in one nation it gotta be, bouncing off inspiration and modesty. Not a token cop trying to collar me for the price of a college fee. When they hear African American, they think superiority. In order to be pure, go to war with the majority. They don't say it entirely. They just feel they're American. They're African. Knocking down this door like we begin with breaking news. Black Lives Matter did. Minnesota did. Every damn state was in the circle did. Knocking down the door like we let it sit. Black Lives Matter did. Nick Cannon did.
Stems from this video showing the W. We see at least
protesters saying the U.S. is looking. In April, he tweeted to the protesters in Minnesota saying you should liberate the state. Now, and we all saw live, everyone globally saw that these were predominantly white people who were standing in the face of police officers, quite frankly, threatening their lives. If a black person had done that, that black person would have been shot. Where was his, I can't stand back and watch this? Donald Trump is being a racist. That is what he's doing right here. He's enabling it. Twitter was absolutely right to do this. George Floyd's death was not just inhumane, it was murder. Murder that it has not just happened today, but happens a lot of the time to black people. How many more George Floyds, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylors must there be for white people to progress? And for people to say that, well, by acting this way, you're being thugs. Remember that the word thug is a negative stereotype used against black people as well. How many more of this kind of racist attacks must black people take for there to be change?
Okay, well, let's bring in Peter Lumage at this point. So Shola there saying Twitter was absolutely right, but the president himself today saying that the platform, the media platform, is targeting the conservative dialogue on social media in particular, and that he is being picked on whilst they're standing by and saying nothing about the actions of China, for example.
Well, again, I mean, with all due respect to my counterpart, understand one thing, that what's happening right now in the United States with the riots, it is not peaceful protesting, it is not civil disobedience. Those are constitutional rights that we have here, and we should exercise them properly. But when you accuse the President of the United States of being racist, the first thing that the President did in this case, he authorized the FBI and the Department of Justice to investigate.
The president himself today saying that the platform, the media platform, is targeting the conservative dialogue on social media in particular, and that he is being picked on whilst they're standing by and saying nothing about the actions of China, for example.
Well,
party, but for himself as well, because he has been heavily criticised for taking African-American voters for
chaos
granted.
and destruction in Minneapolis. Police officers, protesters,
He's
watching WCC.
This comes from the DA's office. Floyd was out in Minneapolis last night. Apparently, this told Houston Police Department. In the video, you can see the DA's office would accept charges on protesters for obstruction a highway. Officers are telling protesters that they would charged. And that's why they ran away. So, if that's why they ran away, then that's certainly a good reason they don't want to be charged with obstruction of traffic, because that certainly would not be done. So that's why they went ahead and ran away. So the DA's office was cut behind this. Don just kept explaining that we got word from the DA's office. Apparently the DA's office told HPD targeting for all who was charged in obstructing traffic. Apparently that's
Hey.
So they want that charge against him.
Okay, now I'm heading back that way. That's what I was doing. I don't cut it. Don't cut it. It looks like went this far. Don't cut
Tonight, an exclusive from the ABC 15 Festival.
Out here from the Arizona whose traffic stop made national flight.
At a Florida middle school has been taken out of classrooms because administrators learned that she had a side job as the host of a white supremacist podcast.
Out of his car and questioned repeatedly, all because of an ear freshener. He believes it was protesting what was returning.
They tell ABC 15 investigators they more about what happened and
another passion, sharing white supremacist ideals and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories on a public social media website, including her own podcast under the Russian pseudonym Tiana Dolokhov.
So many other researchers have already looked into this, and that's just the way it is. There are races that have higher IQs than others.
She also shared her views on Twitter under the same pseudonym, saying things like, "It isn't supremacist or hateful to prefer your own people over others," and "You know America's education system is designed to enable victimization when teachers are forced to learn about institutional racism and prove it's real when it isn't." After the myriad of tweets and comments were first reported by the Huffington Post, the publication shared what they found with the Citrus County School District. The district has
Florida
removed
police
Volitich from the
officers are
classroom
facing
pending
scrutiny
an investigation.
Well, I think what we need
In
is
a
one of those
statement through an
afternoon
attorney,
strong
Volitich
thunderstorms.
denies being
sorry.
anti-Semitic, saying her comments online
Body
were
camera
all
footage
political
posted by the
satire
Orlando Police
in an attempt
Department
to
is
get
making
more
the rounds on
followers.
social media.
None of this
This happened in June. Take a look.
My name is Michael Penn. I'm over here at Fallen Heroes to get swastika covered up.
What agency you were? Thank you. Tag and come back. Never seen that before. I'm sorry? Yeah. We're good now. We ran the tag. I've never seen it before. A Florida tag has never come back to anything before. So that's the reason for the stop. I'm sorry?
What was the tag run?
Oh, we run tags all the time, whether it's a traffic light and that sort of stuff. That's how we figure out if, cars are stolen and that sort of thing. Also, the windows are really dark. I don't have a tint measurer, but that's another reason for the stop. Yeah, 1 second. Actually, this isn't my car, but I can write my name down. Like,
That's all blocked off.
Ready? There you are.
This is who I'm dealing with.
Have a good day.
The Florida prosecutor is currently in a dispute with Florida Governor Rick Scott over his decision to remove her from 24
Yeah, we had a ground picture
after
of
she announced she would not seek the death penalty for a suspect accused of
racing over there to the old police station. I think that perhaps they're just trying to, as you say, just a precautionary measure.
Yeah, I'm Trooper Rummer with the state police. I got a little microphone. It's going to record our conversation, okay?
Yes, sir.
The reason I'm stopping you is because you don't have any license plates on this car. Any reason for that?
I'm from Dubai. It's my license plate right there.
Okay, but you're not in Dubai.
I'm visiting as a tourist.
Well, no, you're not visiting as a tourist if you brought a car with you. Okay, do you have your driver's license with you?
Yeah, of course. How it works is we ship the cars, we get a permit, and
you don't have a permit.
What you need is a carnet.
What's that?
A carnet. It's a very rare thing. I know you're confused, but
no, I'm not confused. If you want to drive this car, you have to have a license plate from somewhere in the United States or a trip permit, which you don't have. Do you have your driver's license with you?
Yes, sir. Yeah, the way it works is we get an EPA exemption.
Pardon me?
A EPA exemption. And then a carnet de passage.
Do you have any of that?
Of course, I'm going to provide everything.
Do you have something that says you can drive this car on the road?
Yes, sir.
Let's take a look at that.
So it's going to be a lot of documents. I'll give you one by one.
I think what you're talking about is the ability to import this, and what I'm talking about is registering it.
No. Well,
you have your driver's license with you.
Yeah. I'm just trying to answer your questions. Well, it's a temporary thing. I'm visiting as a tourist.
I can't hear you.
It's a temporary import.
It's a what?
It's a temporary import. It's not a permanent thing. We fly our cars here, we do our trips, and we fly them back. That's how it works. I know it's confusing, but...
No, it's not confusing. It's very simple. All right? If you have some sort of import, that's to get it into the country. Okay. Let me see what you have that says you can drive it on the road in Oregon.
You understand in a second.
Pardon me?
You're gonna understand in a second.
I'm pretty sure I know what I'm talking about right now.
So this is my permit. It's an international federal agreement.
Okay.
And I'm gonna provide you with a driver's license in a second.
Do you have your insurance with you?
Yes, sir. So this would be the international driver's license, which they come as a package. There you go. The other part is inside it as well.
Something he said was right. That's when Courtney, just like Spanish teacher Bishop, offered for us a hug.
This would be the registration of the vehicle.
What is this?
The registration of the vehicle.
Samantha Beers.
Okay. What I need is proof of insurance. This is
So
this is Canada. Okay.
No, sir.
There you go.
This is UAE.
I need your insurance.
All right. Why are you so defensive? I'm trying to. Why are you so defensive? I'm trying to.
No, I'm just asking for these documents, and you won't quit talking about other stuff.
No, sir. I provide you everything
I
you
want
asked
your
for.
insurance, okay?
I provide you.
I don't need anything else right now.
Sure. You just asked me for the documents.
Pardon me?
You just asked for a document. I provided you, and I'm gonna provide you the insurance in a second, sir. Just give me a second.
Why don't you keep working on that, and I'll be back with you in a minute. Sure.
What's wrong with this guy?
My journey away from violent extremism began 22 years ago when I denounced racism and left the American white supremacist skinhead movement that I'd helped build.
Did you find your insurance?
Yes, sir.
I was just 22 years old at the time, but I had already spent 8 years, from the time I was 14 years old, as one of the earliest and youngest members and an eventual leader within America's most violent hate movement. But I wasn't born into hate. In fact, it was quite the opposite. I had a relatively normal childhood.
This is not insurance.
My parents are Italian immigrants who came to the United States in the mid-1960s and settled in the south side of Chicago, where they eventually met and opened a small beauty shop.
Where did you import the car into?
Right after I was born, things got a little bit more difficult. They struggled to survive with raising a young family and a new business, often working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, taking on second and third jobs just to earn a meager living. And quality time with my parents was pretty non-existent. Even though I knew they loved me very much, growing up, I felt abandoned. I was lonely, and I started to withdraw. And then I started to resent my parents and become very angry. And as I was growing up, through my teenage years, I started to act out to try and get attention from my parents. And one day, when I was 14, I was standing in an alley, and I was smoking a joint, and a man who was twice my age, with a shaved head and tall black boots, came up to me, and he snatched the joint from my lips. Then he put his hand on my shoulder, and he looked me in the eyes, and he said, "That's what the communists and the Jews want you to do to keep you docile." I was 14 years old. I'd been trading baseball cards and watching Happy Days. I didn't really know what a Jew was. It's true. And the only communist that I knew was the, bad Russian guy in my favorite Rocky movie. And since I'm here bearing my soul with you, I can reveal that I did not even know what the word docile meant. Dead serious. But it was as if this man in this alley had offered me a lifeline. For 14 years, I'd felt marginalized and bullied. I had low self-esteem. And frankly, I didn't know who I was, where I belonged, or what my purpose was. I was lost. And overnight, because this man had pulled me in, and I had grabbed on to that lifeline with every fiber of my being, I'd gone from Joni loves Chachi to full-blown Nazi. Overnight. I started to listen to the rhetoric and believe it. I started to watch very closely as the leaders of this organization would target vulnerable young people who felt marginalized and then draw them in with promises of paradise that were broken. And then I started to recruit myself. I started to do that by making white power music. And soon I became the leader of that infamous organization that was led by that man in that alley who recruited me that day, who was America's first neo-Nazi skinhead and who had radicalized me. For the next 8 years, I believed the lies that I had been fed. And though I saw no evidence of it whatsoever, I didn't hesitate to blame every Jewish person in the world for what I thought was a white European genocide being promoted by them through a multiculturalist agenda. I blamed people of color for the crime, the violence, and the drugs in this, completely neglecting the fact that I was committing acts of violence on a daily basis. And that in many cases, it was white supremacists who were funneling drugs into the inner cities. And I blamed immigrants for taking jobs from white Americans, completely neglecting the fact that my parents were hardworking immigrants who struggled to survive despite not getting help from anybody else. For the next 8 years, I saw friends die. I saw others go to prison and inflict untold pain on countless victims and their families' lives. I heard horrific stories from young women in the movement who'd been brutally raped by the very men that they were conditioned to trust. And I myself committed acts of violence against people solely for the color of their skin, who they loved, or the God that they prayed to. I stockpiled weapons for what I thought was an upcoming race war. And 25 years ago, I wrote and performed racist music that found its way to the internet decades later and partially inspired a young white nationalist to walk into a sacred Charleston, South Carolina church and senselessly massacre 9 innocent people. But then my life changed. At 19 years old, I met a girl who was not in the movement, who didn't have a racist bone in her body, and I fell in love with her. And at 19, we got married, and we had our first son. And when I held my son in my arms in the delivery room that day, not only did I reconnect with some of the innocence that I had lost at 14 years old, but it also began to challenge the very important things that drew me to the movement to begin with: identity, community, and purpose, things that I had been struggling with as a young boy. And now, I struggled with the concept of who I was again. Was I this neo-Nazi hate monger, or was I a caring father and husband? Was my community the one that I had manufactured around me to boost my own ego because I felt self-hatred for myself and I wanted to project it onto others? Or was it the one that I had physically given life to? Was my purpose to scorch the earth, or was it to make it a better place for my family? And suddenly, like a ton of bricks hit me, I became very confused with who I'd been for the last 8 years.
Yeah, we saw a little bit of this up on the freeway earlier when police were trying to hold a line to keep folks off I-45. And at that point, when everybody left then, according to an assistant chief, the DA's office told HPD that they would take charges on anybody obstructing the freeway. There's the chief right there. As you can see, the chief talking to the folks in the crowd here. But so the DA's office said that they would do that, and that was relayed to the crowd, and the crowd dispersed.